and really the main question is, well, is God the cause of sin? So does, you know, whenever a person sins, does that person sin of his own, so-called free
Volition.
will? Yeah. Or, you know, does he sin because that's what he was predestined to do by God, who is ultimately the cause of even people's sins? And that's really the big question. And some people, some Calvinists, they'll just say, yeah, he's the he predestines all things, therefore he's the author and cause of even evil.
Well, welcome to City Square Podcast, where we talk with everyday people about faith and work. My guest this episode is Marc Gajeton. He's a father, husband, and Systems Supervisor from DFW, Texas. Thanks for joining me, Marc. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, Micah. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Glad to be sitting down and chatting with you.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what we get into tonight. So for those of you who don't know, this podcast where we talk about faith and work. And so we'll be talking a little bit with Marc about his background and his spiritual journey as he went from point A to point B and the journey in between. So Marc, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Virginia, Virginia Beach. And so I lived there most of my life through high school. And then after high school, I just kind of wanted to get away. Moved all the way across the country to California. And I went to school there. Did some years of college there in California. And then after that, actually ended up back in Virginia, interestingly enough.
Gotcha. So what actually took you to California? Was it just you needed a new
change of scenery?
Change of scenery, new horizons, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I love Virginia. It's a beautiful place with lots of history, and just growing up, sometimes it's you just kind of want to do something different, kind of maybe change up the scene or something along those lines, and that's largely what led me to California. Gotcha. Which was definitely an experience, and vast difference from Virginia. But
what was the number one biggest change then?
Probably because I was pretty close to LA, not far from LA, so it was just a big city, whereas Virginia is more suburban. So that was definitely it. Just the number of people. It was a significant change.
Did you like it in California, or?
Yeah, I had a great time out there. Wasn't not my best years, but I had fun while I was out there. And
good fun or fun that you shouldn't talk about?
Fun that I probably shouldn't talk about. Yeah.
Gotcha. But, okay.
It was like I said, it was a good experience, and
okay, well, we can leave that. So
I met my wife, or my to-be wife at the time. Okay. So that was important.
So it wasn't a total loss then.
Yeah. So, the Lord knows what he's doing. And
sure.
While I don't, he does. And so while I was out there, I met who was to become my wife. And so, yeah, you could say that's pretty important.
Yeah. Okay. How did you guys meet?
Through a mutual friend. That would be the short story of it.
Okay.
Yeah, through a mutual friend, he introduced us, and we had crossed paths before that, but we didn't really, we went to different schools, but I hung out with a lot of people from her school, and so so when I met her, we started dating pretty quickly, and the rest is history, I guess.
Gotcha. And you somehow, after all that, ended up in Texas.
In Texas, yeah. So, so we ended up back in Virginia because there was a good program for her field of study, and so she did that out there. Her graduate studies out in Virginia, but then in order to finish that, so she's a psychologist. So in order to finish that, she had to do a year of internship, which brought us out to Texas. And actually, we had a few choices. And Texas, I think we ranked second because, or she ranked second, sorry. But because the other choice was in California, where not too far from where her family lives. So I
Okay.
think we ranked that first, but got Texas, which again worked out well for us. And we've been here since 2014, so 8 years now.
Nice. Okay. Interesting. So a psychologist, huh? And then what is it that well, I was gonna say what is it you do, but I was also wanting to ask a bunch of questions about how it is being married to a psychologist. So I don't know.
Well,
You can pick which one.
yeah, what I do is definitely not as interesting as what she does. So yeah, I'm a systems supervisor. I work for a healthcare billing company. Um, I do a lot of kind of system maintenance, not physical system maintenance, but more like, making sure that the billing system is performing in tip top shape just to keep things moving in the company. So that's what I do. What it's like being married to a psychologist. She doesn't bring it home a
Okay.
lot.
Are you sure?
Well, I have my suspicions from time to time, but I don't think she would ever tell me if
Yeah, I was gonna say if she
why
was
she's
bringing it
married.
home, how would you actually know?
Exactly. She's very good at her job, so I'm pretty sure I would never know.
Just got to go off trust then, huh?
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So you made it to Texas. You're established, your wife's established. Um, what so it was more like work and like life circumstances that brought you here. And spoiler alert for those who don't know, I'm in Texas as well. Um, so so you grew up in Virginia, California, Virginia to Texas finally. Do you think you're here for good, or are you guys keeping your options open?
Uh, Definitely no plans to move anywhere. And in fact, one of the things that we did before we moved was to look at like churches in the area that we knew that we would be moving to. And we saw that there were a few good ones here in the area that we are now in. And the one that we ended up at, or we're still at, and it actually has a classical Lutheran school, which now, back then we didn't have kids, but now that we do have a couple kids of our own, and our first one has actually just started preschool this year. So yeah, the church has kept us. That is definitely a big thing for us. If we hadn't found a good church in the area, probably wouldn't have been ranked 2 like it was. And, we wouldn't have been here for 8 years now. So that was very important to us. And the fact that it also has a school, and now that we're raising kids, really important.
Cool. Interesting. So what tradition or denomination are you in right now?
We are Lutheran, and we're currently a part of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. But neither of us were raised that way.
Okay. So what was your church background then?
So I was raised Baptist, and it was primarily my mom who took us to church, and she took us regularly. So, we were in the church for many years, and probably though around like middle school. And in fact, actually, the church that we were at was a really nice church, just a good, like, close knit community. And now, because I was so young, I don't remember all the details or what was involved, but I guess suffice it to say that it kind of broke up, you could say. I mean, I think it was still there for some time, but it just wasn't. It got to a point where it wasn't the same, and we ended up leaving that church, and never really found another church quite like it. And we hopped from church to church, I guess, trying out different ones, but never really too pleased with anyone. And I don't know that I would say that contributed to it. I mean, I was in public school too at the time, so when you're only going to church once a week and you're in public school the rest of the time, what's gonna have the most influence on you? And it was definitely life outside of church that did for me. So probably around middle school, I would say, I didn't really have a whole lot of interest in the church. I probably was still going just to go with my mom. And definitely I got to a point where I would say that I wasn't even in the faith anymore at that point. I mean, I still had like beliefs and ideas about God, like in the back of my mind, but in no way practicing. So that probably lasted through a good amount of college, actually, I would say.
So what you were going, maybe not a crisis of faith, because were you more just apathetic, or were you actually hostile to like Christianity?
Oh no, never hostile, but wanting to do the things that young people do, like party and stuff like that. So like I said, it was always kind of in the back of my mind. And even when like I would hear things that would contradict Christianity, I would still kind of not close my ears to them, but I was what's the word? I didn't believe them. Like, I still held to my ideas about, like, Jesus was a real person. He really died and rose again. God really created the earth in 6 days. So all those things I still held to as true, but obviously the way that I was living did not agree with those beliefs. So
Baptists would call that backsliding, I think is the term. They would say, hey, you slid backwards.
Yeah, boy, that's that's like backsliding back to zero, like at best. I mean, it was definitely looking back and now holding to the tenets of Lutheranism that I do now, I can only say that I was not a Christian during those years. because there's a difference between like a historical faith where you can believe that Jesus actually died and rose again, but if you don't actually believe that he died and rose again for you and for your own personal sins, then that's not true faith. That's a historical and even a false faith.
More of like intellectual assent to a series of principles or a proposition or something.
Yeah, definitely. Like what is it? I think is it James, the book of James? The devils believe and tremble, along those lines.
Well, so Baptist to Lutheran is a pretty big jump. At least some stripes or streams of Lutheran. So what was like, walk me through, you were in college when you started to come back to the faith. Was that to just back to kind of your historical Baptist tradition, or was that to something else?
Excuse me. Yeah. So when we were in California, my now wife and I, we started actually seeking out churches, and specifically, now she was raised Roman Catholic, so
Okay.
but I guess somehow I'd convinced her to just kind of follow me along, entertain me, I guess you could say. So we started going, checking out some churches. We actually found one Baptist church that we, I wouldn't say we went regularly, but we frequented maybe, that we liked. But that's really the only one I can think of while we were in California. And then when we moved to Virginia, we just kind of started going to the church that my mom was going to at that time, and she's still going to even at this time. But also during that time, I guess there were a couple of things. The jobs that I was working during that time allowed me to do stuff like this was like the very beginning of podcasts and things like that, where it wasn't, and actually kind of maybe sermon audio. I was listening to a lot of sermon audio. This was like one of the early
I'm
systems.
familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone knows the sermon audio now, but I mean, I think
that was like the spot for everything.
Yeah.
Like you could find everything there.
Yeah, it was definitely before like Apple Podcasts came along or anything like that. I mean, I'm sure there were probably some kind of podcasting thing, but anyway, I was listening to a lot of sermon audio. And I actually switched up what I was studying. So I began my studies as a computer science major because I've always been into computers. And anyway, I switched it up during that time, and maybe listening to a lot of that stuff on sermon audio and things like that, and really starting to get interested in religion, probably contributed to me switching my major to religion, and I finished that as an online program through Liberty University.
Okay.
But yeah, I really remember really well, some of the people that I was listening to on things like sermon audio, and learning a lot of things from. And one of the guys, his name was Trevor Hammock, and he's actually here in Texas too, in Abilene. And I don't really know, I don't keep up with him anymore at this point, but he at least was a Reformed Baptist preacher. And prior to listening to him, I really knew nothing about Reformed theology, like election. I mean, I never heard any of that stuff. But when I did, I looked to see if those are the things that Scripture actually teaches. And so, yeah, definitely during that time, I would say I became Reformed. in my theology. I believed it was very logical to me. The total depravity, unconditional election. I mean, almost once you uh, recognize election as a biblical teaching, a lot of those things do follow. They fall in line. So yeah, I would say I converted, if you will, to Reformed theology. But he would play clips from other podcasters or preachers or pastors too. And one of the guys he introduced me to was Chris Roseborough. And so Chris Roseborough, for anyone who doesn't know, has a discernment ministry where he basically rags on like these, the really big evangelical so-called preachers and teachers, guys like Stephen Furtick and Joel Osteen. He just goes to town on him.
Yeah.
But he's a Lutheran, and his program wasn't really explicitly Lutheran. Like, he wasn't trying to convert people to Lutheranism, but what he would do was drop these little nuggets here and there, these little hints. He'd say something like, baptism saves, which is what Peter says.
Right.
Or things like that, or baptism is for the remission of sins, which is what Luke says in the book of Acts. So he would drop those things here and there. And so I guess that, combined with the fact that I was studying religion at Liberty, I took those things seriously. And so during my studies at Liberty, I came to the realization that I believed what Lutheranism teaches. And so yeah, Liberty turned me into a Lutheran.
Chris Roseborough, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. I had no idea. So that's a bit of a jump then, right? You went from, I guess, more traditional Baptist or evangelical to, how long did you consider yourself Reformed Baptist?
Yeah.
Or Reformed in any sense?
Probably a few years. And actually, even before kind of making the jump to Lutheranism, I never considered myself Presbyterian, but we tried some, we tried checking out some Presbyterian churches when we were like, because my mom's church where she's at, it is Southern Baptist, and I guess within that you can be Reformed or not, but they weren't explicitly Reformed, and it's a pretty big church. So I also, I guess we were at the time wanting to also look for something more traditional too, and less mega churchy praise band stuff, and more historic hymnody and worship and stuff like that.
That was before you were a Lutheran? Even you were drawn to that sort of thing?
Yeah. So like I said, we checked out, we started looking at some Presbyterian churches. Never considered ourselves Presbyterian, but so I guess the transition was straight from Reformed Baptist to Lutheranism. Sorry, did you ask me a question?
I don't know, but I forget it now. So yeah, that is pretty interesting, because what would you then say was there a moment when you realized that you were moving in that direction of Lutheranism, or was it just like a gradual process?
Yeah, well, in light of the fact that we were, looking for something more historic, And then also obviously the doctrinal issues there too. I would say it was definitely a gradual process. I wouldn't say it lasted a whole lot of time because, and it definitely didn't because, so funny story, what happened was my wife and we got engaged, and we were going to have the wedding in California. So we're in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna go back to California for the wedding because that's where all her family is, and I guess my family, they'd be more likely to travel, I guess was the thing. So
The wife,
and
the
we're
bride
living,
gets, the bride
yeah,
gets to pick the venue.
that's true, yeah. And we were living in Virginia, so we're around them all the time, and so we want to go where her family is for the wedding. And so we're looking for a pastor to do our wedding, and we find a Reformed Baptist guy because we're Reformed Baptists at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this guy, and I think I had reached out to several people, but some of them didn't want to do it because basically we were living together at the time, and which no, not good, right? But it was what it was, and we explained to him, we're like, hey, we're trying to do the right thing, and he was like, yeah, I get it, yes, I'll do this for you because y'all are trying to do the right thing, and why should I say no when and prevent you? And so anyway, that guy, awesome, I love that guy. He's Reformed Baptist, he's wrong, but I love him and can't wait to see him in heaven. I actually lost touch with him, unfortunately. I mean, I kind of know where he's at, but we used to keep up on social media, but not so much anymore. But anyway, so we found this guy, Reformed Baptist. He married well, before we got married, we had to break the news to him. Hey, we're kind of Lutheran now. Will you still marry us? And he did. And he tried to kind of talk us out of it first. He was like, hey, would you have some time maybe to chat about some things? Maybe we can correspond about those things via email. And I was open to it, and we did. He realized he wasn't changing our minds. So, but he still married us. And so, that, I guess all that's to say, the transition lasted, a year or less from Reformed Baptist to Lutheranism, because that's about how long it was when we found him to, us getting married.
How long after you were married did you move to Texas?
A year. So we were married in 2013, and then we moved to Texas in 2014.
Gotcha. Okay. And then that was it. You're fully Lutheran, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so. Fully Lutheran, looking for a Lutheran church, and yep.
Yeah. So you studied religion, right? Or Liberty's version of religion. What was the actual degree called?
A Bachelor of Science in Religion. And it's funny because, I'm obviously I'm not a pastor or anything like that. And I'm in healthcare billing. So, I have to say Bachelor of Science in Religion. So I don't say a BS in religion. And people, yeah, well, pretty much a BS in religion because you're not doing anything with it.
I've heard that before. So what made you change the major? Did you think you were going to go into some type of religious work or ministry or something like that?
No, actually, I don't think that was my plan. It's just that was, what I wanted to study and what I was interested in. Yeah, so especially at that time, no, I had no thought that I was going to become a pastor or anything like that.
So interesting. So your current degree really kind of has nothing to do with what you're doing for your vocation or your work.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Sounds like somebody else I know.
That's right. You Moody, was it Moody?
No, West Coast Baptist College was where I went.
Okay.
And that was actually in California as well, just a different part,
Okay.
not as fun as LA. So yeah, got my, I don't know if it's a BS, I think it's a BRE, Bachelor of Religious Education in
That
church
sounds
ministry.
better.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it does or not, but yeah. And then I'm in essentially medical field as well. So fun
Yep.
times.
But, it was important. Like it was obviously it had I think it had some effect. It allowed me the time to really closely study and to figure out what I believed. And I guess without that time, who knows if I would have become a Lutheran? I don't know.
What do you think? What do you think your future plans are for your vocation? Are you happy in the field you're in? Are you looking for other things? What are you doing?
I've never really been like a real kind of ambitious person. I just kind of take things as they come to me.
Hmm.
And right now with two young kids, that's definitely the focus. So wanting to, train them up in the right way, give them a solid grounding and foundation, and have some more kids maybe, hopefully, Lord willing.
What's the
So
goal? What's the number goal? Do you have one?
my number goal is different from my wife's number goal for obvious reasons, but my goal, actually we had a period of time where we were trying for a long time, like 5 years almost, unable to have kids. So we finally did, and our first was born in 2019. So she's 3 years old now, and then the Lord blessed us again with the second one, and he's 9 months. So we're mid-30s, so not a whole lot of time left, but maybe we can make the most of it, and we just want to see them grow into good Christian adults. So that's the goal.
Yeah.
And then maybe if something comes along the way, or after they're older, I might consider pursuing something else. Once I maybe have the ability to have a different sphere of influence among doing something else, and no longer raising young kids at that point.
Yeah, as a fellow parent of young children, I don't know, they're a little emotional, physical, mental vampires, I'd say. They just kind of they suck everything out of you, man. There's just
they take everything.
Yeah.
But the reward is so great, right? So
yeah, I mean, yeah, they're such a joy. They're a joy, they're a blessing. They're also incredibly tiring. So
yeah.
Okay, you're a systems supervisor, you went to school for religion, you're thinking about, hey, what's on the horizon then? Kids are grown, you have options. What do you want to pursue then?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a time where I wanted to go to seminary.
Okay.
Well, before we had kids, but now that we do, it's potentially still an option. I don't really know what things will look like that far down the road, but I mean, it's certainly something I'd be open to, and consider doing. I'm also very interested in things like politics. So I also serve as the precinct chair for our precinct here in North Texas. So if anything opened up in that regard, I'd be open to that too.
Politician or pastor? I mean, how do you decide? Both equally important, right?
Well, what I'm hoping is that, in 10, 20 years or however many I'm far more mature. And at that point, maybe I'll be, pastor would make some sense. But, now at this point, politician would probably make more sense.
Oh, I've seen how some young politicians act in Congress and stuff like that, and I tend to side more on the seasoned side of things now, where some of them are just embarrassments in both parties, honestly.
Some of them, the vast majority of them.
Well, I'm talking about specifically about the really young ones that we've had
Oh.
over the past few years.
Oh yeah, they're terrible. I mean, good grief.
Both parties.
Yep.
So, yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd love to go there and do battle with some of these younger.
It seems to me that we need to shrink the age range that's allowed. Like, let's take out some of the geriatrics, take them out of their spots, and we can maybe bring it up to like mid 30s or something on the low end. I don't know. Maybe that would solve some of what we're currently in.
Well, it's certainly a different day now, right, than it was 200 years ago. So, your 25-year-olds or whatever are not what they used to be.
Yeah,
largely.
That's true. My wife and I were just talking about something similar like that tonight. How adolescence has kind of been prolonged in many ways. So now it's almost like maturity as an adult doesn't come around until, late 20s in some cases, maybe even longer.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before it was a teenager was a small adult, that had a lot more responsibility and like weight and gravity to their life, it seemed. I mean, I might just sound like a boomer at this point, but
yeah, no, I'm really interested, especially in the intersection of faith and civil life. So, our society, we have so many more fundamental issues that obviously, but, a lot of the people involved in politics are, they're just, the Republicans, they're 10 years behind the Democrats. Basically, they're trying to hold the line and not really making any good advancements of their own. And so society just continues to decline, just, as slowly as the Republicans will let it, right? Basically.
Are they, they're the ones who are, let's see, the Democrats are speeding down the highway with no seatbelt, and the Republicans are going down at the speed limit and with their seatbelts on, yet they're still going in the same direction. Is that I'm probably butchered it, but I've heard that illustration before.
Yeah, something like that. Whereas, I would go in there and I'd definitely have some more, I guess you could say, take some more extreme measures. I guess you could say, but in my view, they're not very extreme. they're just common sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that code, or is the FBI gonna come knock on your door any second now?
Sorry. First episode. Get them off the air.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm saying interesting a lot. That's gonna be fun to edit out. So you are precinct chair. What does that entail? Like, what are your responsibilities?
So one of the things I get to do is I get to go to the county meetings for our party, and I get to vote on things, get to have a say, get to have some influence in that regard. And then the other primary responsibility is really getting out and getting people to vote and keeping people informed in your area or in my area. Now, I will say I haven't done the best in that regard. Definitely more active in the, I guess you could say, the more theoretical side, since it's, a matter of making judgments on things. And that's kind of my personality too. So,
Hmm.
so yeah, I get to go to those meetings and have some influence there, and definitely need to get out more and be more active though in the area and getting to know people.
How much of your time does that take up? Would you say?
Um, so during so the meetings are monthly, and they can be short, they can be a couple hours long. Um, but definitely, it ramps up during like campaign season. So every couple of years, before election day, that's when most of the work takes place.
My
So
story. Yeah, my precinct chair actually blocked me on Facebook because I didn't like the rhino candidates that she was endorsing in
oh,
in the primaries.
oh,
She was being like, I kind of assume that if you're like a precinct chair, you're supposed to be for your current party and you're not really a kingmaker. But for whatever reason, this particular person decided to side with a candidate in the primaries and worked for them. So
you need to
I
run
was,
again. That's what you need to do.
yeah, I don't know if I have the time or the inclination, honestly.
Yeah, actually, so ours was vacant, so that's how I got mine. I never
Okay.
run anybody.
Where I live, there's a lot of them for our town. It's a fairly large town or slash city, whatever you want to call it. So there's a lot of precincts, and she just happens to be in mine. And since we've recently moved, I'm officially in hers now. And I thought it was hilarious that I'm actually blocked on Facebook. She's unblocked me a few times and then blocked me again. I don't know why. I don't know what I did. I don't really directly interact with her very much. It's just kind of a mystery, you know. It's like, oh wow, okay, she didn't like me. Whatever. she well,
I could not come up with a reason to ever block you.
oh, I bet you could if you tried. Let's see how this episode performs. What else do you do outside of work and home? What are your hobbies or interests or
So I um, I definitely think of myself as like a jack of all trades and master of none.
hmm.
So lots of interests, besides obviously uh, things pertaining to the Christian life, reading theology, things like that. But also like, gardening, woodworking, building things, fixing things. Um, but as I said, master of none of those. So I can enjoy doing them, but I would not consider myself an expert in a lot of these things by any means. um, I also obviously spend a lot of time, most of our time at church. I do also serve on the board of elders at our current church there. Um, so put a good amount of time into that. Um, but we also we bought our first house in 2019, which I never want to do again. So that's probably another thing that'll keep me planted here in Texas. But so as you know, that is a never-ending list of things to do, but
Yeah.
enjoyable in many ways, many times, not all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, time is definitely scattered among a lot of various interests. So another interest. So I mentioned gardening, but actually, one of the things that really interests me about gardening is this thing called permaculture. I don't know if you've ever heard of it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more of like a, um, it's not your typical, let's plant things nice and orderly, and have it like this kind of manufactured look. but more of like replicating nature in a way in your own yard. So that's uh, I wouldn't say it's something I'm very interested in, but I can only put as much time into it as I have. So
Is
uh,
that just an excuse to, for your bad lawn? Is that what I'm hearing?
no, I have
I don't
others.
know.
I have other excuses for my bad lawn.
Oh, okay. I was just assuming you had a bad lawn. I just made a guess.
Um, but yeah, no, I'm definitely out there experimenting, and thankfully I have very forgiving neighbors, so they don't mind my experimentation, and actually we're a pretty young family here in our neighborhood, so it's a pretty it's an older neighborhood, so a lot of the people here are they're retired, their kids are all grown up, and they're just, I mean, they're all really just lovely people, and they send gifts to our kids and things like that, but they're probably just chalk it up to, oh well, there's the crazy young people doing whatever it is they're doing. They'll
So,
figure it out eventually.
so you don't have an HOA basically breathing down your neck.
No, and thank God for that, because that, man, it's difficult to not have an HOA here in Texas, as you know. So
Yeah.
really glad to.
Ours is unobtrusive as far as I can tell. There are some neighborhoods where I've heard just horror stories, but ours seems to be, a lot of money for nothing at this point. Honestly, it's not that bad cost wise, but still, it's like, what do you do?
Yeah, well, if I had to choose between paying someone to tell me what I can or can't do with my property, or to pay someone to basically leave me alone, I'd pay the person to leave me alone.
Yeah, I think that's what we're doing so far. So, I mean, we've only been in this place for 5 months, maybe 6 months. So we'll see how it goes. See if there's any, some of the lawns, I got to say, some of the lawns in our neighborhood, clearly the HOA doesn't care that much. So,
Well, next time I have you over, I'll have to make sure that ours is nice and tidy.
I can bring my mower if you want, we could make it a joint project. So you mentioned reading like theology and sort of that sort of thing. What types of books are, well, let's rephrase it. What's on your nightside table right now for reading, if you do that?
Yeah, I do keep some books by the bed. I don't do as much reading in the bed. Well, one, because I'm a night owl, so I'll just be out, uh, up all night, and not necessarily in bed. The other reason is we have a 9-month-old sleeping in our bed right now, so if I am reading, it's usually maybe on the phone or the iPad or something. But I do keep some books by the bed, some easier or lighter reading, or something that I can just kind of dip into um, for however long I'll be laying there before I fall asleep. So I believe right now I've got a church history book there. The one, I think it's Bruce Shelley is the author of
I think
that
I
one.
read that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a lot into that. But I have some other thing. I guess a lot of the books I have there are more like historical kind of books, because
Mm.
um, those just for me at least are the kind of easier reads in the evening. They don't take a whole lot of concentration. It's not like reading a dogmatics book or something like that. So yeah, history books. I think a couple on like some like biographical books, small biographical sketches of like the American founding fathers,
Mm.
and then some literature uh, there too. I think I have a poetry book there, but yeah,
So,
not a whole lot that goes on there by the bedside table.
so you you actually read books that most people just say they read, what it sounds like.
I try to.
Try to.
I try to. Um, as you know, it's challenging with young kids, but so yeah, it's after they go to bed that I'll be able to finally pull the book out. I try to read sometimes when they're around, but it's near impossible.
Yeah, you get through like half a paragraph and have to start over.
Or I have to read it like 13 times to understand what it's saying.
Gotcha. So what's actually on your reading list right now? Not necessarily by the table, but
Right now, so one of maybe I could have mentioned this as one of the things that I do. I mean, I like to just kind of talk theology with people, and one of the ways that we can do that is through social media. So not the best way to do it, but it's a way.
better than nothing. Better than nothing.
Yeah, it's what's the saying by Francis Bacon, that conference maketh a ready man, or something like that. If you don't,
Sure.
if you never talk to people, like have serious or try to have serious conversations with people, then when they finally come up, you're not going to know what to say, right? So it's a good exercise, at least. So well, one of the topics that's been coming up a lot lately is free will, and things surrounding that. So I've been just kind of reading some books on the topic of free will. I kind of started with some smaller reads, I guess you could say, and kind of working my way out from there. So right now I'm reading through Martin Chemnitz's section from his his dogmatics books on free will, and on sin, and concerning contingency. And then I think from there I'll probably either read Johann Gerhard, his volume on the same topic, or Martin Luther. I haven't really decided which one I'll read next.
Would that be
that would be Martin Luther's The Bondage of the Will, which I read a long time ago, but I read it when I was still a Calvinist, so I need to go back and reread it as a Lutheran.
That's like the only book of Luther's that Calvinists actually read, honestly.
Yeah,
they're like, oh, this guy agrees with me on everything. No need to read anything else he's got.
Yeah, they like to try to basically claim him as their own, just solely based on that book, right?
They should keep reading. They might not like what they find.
Yeah. But yeah, so sometimes I'll read through, like just read through a book, or I'll kind of take one topic at a time or something like that. So that's kind of what I'm on right now.
Interesting. No, and I mean that sincerely. It's definitely, because I think I'm in probably some of the same groups you are, not all of them maybe, but and some of those discussions can be, well, some of them are interesting. Some of them are like scholarly in some sense, and well reasoned, or at least well thought out, and then others they're just dumpster fires, man.
yeah you definitely have to pick and choose which ones you get involved in. And yeah, I mean, this particular topic, it can be very in depth, and sometimes a lot of philosophical reasoning it enters into the discussion. So but it's a really important one.
So free will, that's more about in some senses, how can man approach God? How does God approach man? in the sense of what people think of as like the initial sort of salvation experience. And then would it be like man's responsibility or man's ability to do good works and that sort of thing? Is it all in there, or is it more focused on one of those?
Uh, yeah, there are a lot of questions that come up concerning free will. So yeah, like you mentioned, what is man's ability, for example, in conversion, or what's his part in conversion? And from there you can kind of even divide up the stages of conversion. And this is what some writers do. And so yeah, man, he's entirely passive at these stages of conversion. But then in this stage, his he does, because God gives him new powers to will to believe. And then man begins to cooperate with the Holy Spirit, whom he receives um, in conversion and justification and regeneration. And then what's man's ability after that? Is he does he have some kind of liberty at that point, and in what regard? So yeah, lots of questions. And then one of the other questions that comes into play is do all things take place by necessity? So
Can you break that down like I'm five?
yeah, so we can talk about God's foreknowledge and predestination. And so what does his predestination apply to? Some Calvinists will say that basically anything that comes to pass, God has predestined it. So even whatever, anything. Some Calvinists will say that, not all. And but so is that true? That would be one of the questions. Or even if God knows all things, so even if he doesn't predestine them, but he knows them, so he knows what you're going to eat tomorrow night for dinner, then could it happen otherwise? And if it can't, then does it mean that takes place by necessity? So like you actually have no choice, you have no free will in that. So those are some of the questions that come up. And if
Yeah.
and really the main question is, well, is God the cause of sin? So does whenever a person sins, does that person sin of his own so-called free
Volition.
will? Yeah. Or does he sin because that's what he was predestined to do by God, who is ultimately the cause of even people's sins? And that's really the big question. And some Calvinists, they'll just say, yeah, he's he predestines all things, therefore he's the author and cause of even evil. And they try to get around this and make it palatable in various ways. But even the ones who want to deny it, well, they still kind of have to explain their position in a way. But I haven't really found a good one from that camp either. So
I think we're gonna have to do an entire episode probably on this topic because it's fascinating to me. I grew up more traditional free will Baptist, which might be called semi-Pelagian in some circles. Whereas, the gospel is effectual of a call enough for you to respond. The focus in our Bible college was on, soul winning and being a good, it sounds crass to say this, but being a good salesman, for the gospel, selling Jesus door to door, and hope that someone believes you and prays a prayer. And then I was reformed for several years, and I believe rightly embraced, election and, election unto salvation, God initiating salvation. Um, so, um, and obviously I've seen some of those discussions too, where a Calvinist would say, so one Calvinist would say God literally is the author of evil without blinking. And then another one would say, no, that's not true, and then, there's another one taking a third position.
Uh-huh.
What, man, we'll have to do another episode because there's so many ways we could go with this.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's
And, like
pencil
I
that
said,
in.
yeah, that's kind of what I'm on right now. And, but, from there, I'll move on to, another book or topic or something like that. That just
Now,
happened
correct
now.
me if I'm wrong, but Luther's position, and I would say I'm assuming the Lutheran position, because the Lutheran confessions are more than just Luther. He's not the sole author. He's not the Lutheran Pope, right? Or the necessary. He's one of the main, obviously, figures. But his position on that would be, um, man is responsible for their sin. God is responsible for drawing man toward salvation, conversion. Um, and if I'm remembering the terminology correctly, man in an unregenerate state, in a fallen state, can choose civil righteousness in some senses. Like, we have free will to choose to eat and to drink and to, go to the store or whatever, but we don't have the freedom to choose the good in a spiritual sense. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's definitely, an accurate portrait of the essential Lutheran understanding of, man's part in salvation, or lack thereof. I guess you could say that he is.
Mm, it's true.
Yeah, and it is God. We are, a lot. I mean, I don't use this term often, but, one of the terms that people like to use today is monergist, which is to say, that, salvation is, by God alone, not sinner, as opposed to synergism, which is, that man has some part in it, as well.
Mm.
So, we would definitely, if we were to, uh, ascribe either of those terms to ourselves, would be on the side of the monergists.
So the unable to choose the good spiritually, unable to bring ourselves to salvation, but able to choose perhaps civil righteousness of some type or good deeds in a secular sense. Would you say that's the broadly the Calvinist view as well? Like I'm talking like mainstream kind of Calvinism.
Um, yeah, it's a really good question. Um, because they would definitely, be monergists concerning, salvation. So, man has no part. Uh, he has no, or he exercises no, like, free will capabilities to choose salvation for himself. But as far as, like, civil righteousness or, external good works, that's a really good question, and I'm, not too sure. It's not one of the topics that I really thought a whole lot about back when I was reformed, and,
Hmm.
uh, and the ones that I've talked to, uh, at least lately, like, they don't focus a whole lot on
Okay.
the civil righteousness, or good works or anything like that. And because you can, now I would say actually that, like, the strict determinist position, I mean, it's not too far off from mainstream when it comes to Calvinism. So, um, yeah, I mean, I've heard James White make this, for example, make this argument over and over again that, um, well, if God knows that, what you're going to eat for dinner tomorrow, then can you do anything other than that? I mean, this is one of his go-to things. So,
Well, my question would be, can we answer that from scripture? Or, and this is not intended as a gotcha, but it's like, do we have an answer to that particular question in scripture, or do we have to get there through some other means? Do you have an opinion on that?
like concerning, so the explicit question in that matter is, does God's foreknowledge create necessity?
Okay.
And so would that question be answered in scripture, at least like pertaining to external good works? Well, yeah,
Even
because the answer is that God is not the cause of sin.
right,
So
that's
it's
would that be the negative side, right? God is not the cause of sin.
right.
Um,
So
but
uh,
is he the cause? I don't know. It's maybe a little past my pay grade here.
yeah. Um, so as far as the extra, I had definitely have to think about that.
Well, yeah, I was more thinking about that example of, well, what are you having for supper tomorrow night? Well, I haven't decided that yet.
Mhm.
God knows it, right? He knows everything. He's omniscient. He has foreknowledge.
Oh,
We
right.
would say he is. I mean, I think I've probably said it something like this before. He is outside of time, right? He is timeless in a sense. He's not bound to temporal concerns like we are. Um, have
Yeah.
you seen or you may have heard or seen this illustration before? There's the three dots on a chalkboard or on a whiteboard. It's like, these are your life, and then there's this line, that extends from before to after. Ours consists of this. Well, God is standing back here viewing everything.
Mm.
Like,
I've seen that one.
well, it's pretty good. I don't think I invented it, but if I did, I'll take credit.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Um,
I've heard that. I heard that from someone. So, but yeah, it was more of a sense like God does know everything. Therefore, does it come to pass because he knows it? And like you said, of necessity.
yeah. Oh, so yeah. So now, um, so yeah. What I would go back to is to the garden, to Genesis, because
Mhm.
man was created with free will. He had the ability to choose the good. Spiritually, he also had the ability to choose the evil. And what he lost in the fall was not the ability to, um, choose, what he's going to eat for dinner. What he lost was the ability to choose anything good spiritually. So yeah, that's probably where I would start with that, or answering that question, because
Hmm.
man was created with that ability to, eat from this tree or from this other tree.
What would you
Uh,
say to what would you
that's
say
not what
to
we've lost.
well, what would you say then to a Calvinist who would argue that they didn't actually have free will? Because not everyone would argue that. Not every Calvinist would argue that. So, but I have seen some people that say, um, Adam and Eve, because God knew that was going to happen, there was no other possible scenario or no other possible alternative.
Yeah, well, I think the basic response to that if God knows something, therefore it happens of necessity, is I don't think that like logically follows. So you can talk about God knowing something, knowing that it's going to take place, or that he caused it himself, that he actually brought it about by his own um, omnipotent power or working, or exercise of his will.
Because we do see that kind of juxtaposition at times in scripture, right? They're not necessarily always tied together.
So yeah, so like something happening where God didn't necessarily himself bring it about, as in the case of sins, and then God actually doing something, by exercising his own almighty power. Yeah, we definitely see those two different things happening. In the Calvinist camp, there are those, as you mentioned, that would say, man didn't, even in the garden, didn't have free will. I think there are those who would say otherwise too, but to the ones who, and even those, there are many who use different terms, or the same term differently, because one Calvinist might say God ordained the fall, and by that mean that he basically brought it about. He caused it himself, because this was his plan from eternity. But there are others who would say that God ordained the fall, but not in that sense, not in the sense that he actually himself caused it, but that, I don't know what they mean at that point, to be honest. Still trying to kind of figure that out. But
Gotcha.
yeah, for those who would say like, God caused the fall, I mean, they make him the cause of evil at that point, which is a fundamental article of the faith that can't be, transgressed for any reason. So not to fit your theological system, or for anything, God is good, and there's no evil in him.
I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I think they were talking about, it was either free will or original sin, coincidentally. And the pastor that was speaking was basically he referred to sin, and I think its initial form, as more of an absence of what is good than direct, like in a sense of their evil and sin is not this actual matter. It's more of an absence of the goodness of God. And I don't really know if I'd heard it quite articulated in that way before.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
I've seen something like that, maybe on like Eastern Orthodox chats or something like that. But
yeah, it would be interesting to know what podcast that was, or what background they're coming from. But yeah, I mean, I would certainly agree with them, that evil is not actually a substance itself. It's a lack.
I think that was,
and so, I mean, if you think about it, back in the garden, God created all things, and he looked at his creation, he saw that it was very good. So evil is not a creation or a creature of God. Evil is brought about by Satan and the will of man. And it's a corruption of actually what God had created to be very good. It's a creation and not creation, a corruption of the good creation of God. And actually, the one place that this comes up in our own Lutheran confessions, it very importantly, is concerning the concerning the person of the Son of God. Because and the question explicitly really is concerning original sin. So if sin were actually a substance, a creation of God, such that it now belongs to man's nature, that he is inherently sinful, not simply that he has a sinful nature, but that his actual human nature is sin, then the Son of God cannot take upon himself a human nature that is without sin. And so we must make this distinction between the human nature, which God created to be good, and the corruption of that human nature, which is not essential to that human nature, but is only accidental. So that's one of the important places that it comes up in our own Lutheran confessions, and we would wholeheartedly agree on that point, that sin is not a creature of God.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah,
Interesting.
that's another extremely fascinating discussion. I mean,
yeah.
that's a great thing about theology. And one of the books I read when I was at Liberty, our I guess you could call it our systematics textbook, introduced me to this idea of theology as being the queen of the sciences, and I just love that, because all theology, it deals with obviously with God, and anthropology, so with man, but also philosophy and history, and we have Christian art, so it just deals in all matters, and I just love that about theology.
The visitor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi everyone, this is Belle. She's apparently not been fed yet, so
Oh, poor girl.
That's why she's bothering me. I thought that
she's
someone else. What's that?
She's handling it pretty well. When my son hasn't been fed, I mean, he loses it.
Yeah. I'll be cooking dinner on the stove, and my daughter will be like, "Daddy, I'm hungry." I'm like, hi, hungry. I'm dad, of course. After we get that out of the way, I'll be like, I'm making you dinner right now. Can you wait for 10 more minutes? But I'm hungry. I'm like, I understand. That doesn't make this cook any faster.
It's so funny.
Oh man, this has been fun. We will need to do an entire program on theology, I think. So
be glad to do it.
Well, we'll wrap up there then. Appreciate you taking the time to chat. Thanks for joining, everybody. If you liked it, or if you enjoyed the conversation, go ahead and like the video. It helps out with the YouTube algorithm. If you leave a comment, it helps out even more. And of course, if you did really enjoy it and would like to see more of this, then please don't forget to hit the subscribe button before you leave. So if you enjoyed it, we appreciate you checking out the rest of our channel. Until we meet again, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Amen.
Thank you, Micah. Have a good night.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.